But thanks for joining today. My name is Rebecca Sallade. I use she, her pronouns. If you are an ASC Honors student, I will be your Honors Thesis Coordinator. And we have Cameron Vonner here, who is our office admin, monitoring the chat in the waiting room here. So thanks to Cam for joining. If you are familiar with Spicy Susan in our Denny Hall office, Cam is kind of her partner in crime. So we love to see it. So let's get started here. So just a disclaimer, and I'll move the Zoom. Just the disclaimer about who this webinar is for. This is only for ASC Arts and Sciences Honors students or prospective ASC Honors students. So you can still do a thesis even if you are outside of Arts and Sciences. You would work with your assigned advisor. If you are a non-honors student, but maybe in ASC, or you are an arts honors student, you can still absolutely do a thesis. You would just be working with Ed Quinn, who is our regular thesis advisor here. So the reason for this, especially for the arts and sciences portion, I make the disclaimer because rules do vary by college. So if you are, for example, a public health or pharmacy student, not all of these rules may apply to you today. As far as the difference between honors and non-honors thesis go, the rules are not intended to be different by any means, but I need you to default to whatever you hear from Ed Quinn here. You cannot do an ASC Honors thesis without being an ASC Honors student. There's a common misconception that an honors thesis is more intense or higher up than a standard thesis, but this is simply not true. The reason we make the distinction is it just matches the wording on your diploma. So again, if you're a non-honor student, you are still eligible to graduate with research distinction and should work with Ed Quinn. All right, let's talk about the layout today. As you can see, we're going to be covering a lot of information, especially in the application process section. So whether you are hearing the word thesis for the first time today or getting ready to defend this fall, I would encourage you to jot down questions as they come up along the way. So if you ever chatted with me, I'm sure you can already tell, my toxic trait is giving way too much information, so a lot of questions might be answered along the way. But if not, it's good practice to write them down and free up our precious brain space throughout the rest of the presentation. I put this little cat guy in the corner along the way on slides where I think questions might pop up as just a reminder to jot some things down. The chat is open, so feel free to use it. Unless I see an urgent clarifying question along the way, I'm going to save most of the incoming questions for the very end when we're doing the question and answer section. So this meeting is being recorded. We will de-identify questions at the end and along the way, but of course, if you choose to unmute yourself, we're not in a crime documentary here. I don't have the magic voice changing powers, so just keep that in mind. All right, so let's start with the basics. What is an undergraduate thesis? So by definition, a thesis is an original research process that results in a few different things. So you have an original question or hypothesis, so a brand new thing we're investigating. You have an individualized data collection and analysis. You are participating in the manuscript writing process, and then you are formally defending your findings. So the final document, which is your manuscript, combined with defending your thesis with the oral defense, which we'll talk about, allows us to certify you to graduate with honors research distinction. So we'll talk about what will be printed on your diploma in a bit. But this project, if you're doing a thesis, it can start completely from scratch with no research experience, or maybe you do have previous or current research lab experience and you want to take it to the next level. So previous research experience is not required, although most applicants have some sort of experience before starting on your own project. I'll say even if you are in a lab, you have that experience, you're not required to be affiliated with that lab or incorporate that topic at all into your thesis. You could do something completely different. If you are stemming from a faculty advisor's lab, you need to find a way to make a project that is yours alone and completely individualized. So this can look like a variety of things. Maybe your research team is gathering data as a group, but you're analyzing it with different variables or in a new way that your research team isn't doing. Maybe you have a question that is just yours. Maybe you are collecting data with a questionnaire for participants and you have a question on that questionnaire that is just for your thesis. Maybe you are using secondary data. For example, maybe you're using a large set of data from the Ohio Department of Health, for example, and you're looking at it in a brand new way. So it's public data, it's group data, but you're looking at it in a new way. Or of course, you can do your own data collection process, which is probably what most students do. So research looks different for everyone. I'm sure if you Google the word research, like I've done here, you're going to see a lot of pictures of test tubes and beakers and microscopes, but there are tons of fields and labs and topics out there that you can be working with. So while a good chunk of us might be working in a traditional, sciencey kind of setting with beakers and test tubes, this is just one method of data collection. Maybe some of us are gathering data from ancient manuscripts, maybe from verbal or written surveys or questionnaires like we talked about. Maybe you're studying physical artifacts like skulls and bones, coding and programming, etc. You get the gist here. So I'll say if you have a burning research question that you are motivated to answer with evidence, and you want to write about it, then you can absolutely turn it into an undergraduate thesis. So how does a thesis compare to traditional research? So let's talk about what is the same first. So I will say you can get most aspects of a thesis within a traditional research lab. We're just more free to mix and match here. So for example, in a standard research lab, if you're a part of a group, you do have exposure to the scientific process. You can definitely write about your group's findings or your findings. You can present at different research festivals and conference presentations. You can get publications. You can work with faculty. You could earn academic credit for your research experience. So I'll say here, the only thing you can't get without pursuing a thesis is the diploma distinction. But again, you can get most aspects of this process if you're happy in your traditional research lab. Now I'll say, we talked about all the different things you can experience in a research lab. Maybe you're not experiencing all these things. So for example, maybe you are joining a lab where the data collection and analysis is already done and you are helping with the manuscript writing process, but you're kind of joining towards the end of the scientific process. Whereas a thesis, you are kind of forced to participate in all of those points on the previous slide. So what makes a thesis different? So first of all, individuality from your lab. So again, traditional research usually involves contributing to someone else's hypothesis. So whether it's a postdoc or a faculty member or a graduate student, whereas a thesis or your own project is pursuing your own hypothesis and burning research question. Again, you can start a project from scratch or be affiliated with a current lab. Credit hours. Absolutely. For traditional research, they are optional but encouraged. With a thesis, you are required to earn credit hours. So we'll talk about the requirements down the road, but you need to be earning $49.99 honors credit if you are pursuing a thesis. This is just because it's, again, tied to what is printed on your diploma. So we do have a credit hour requirement. Again, we are kind of being forced to engage with the entire scientific process if we are doing a thesis. So again, standard research can involve a variety or a combination of those different pieces like data collection, manuscript writing, participating, creating like a coding scheme to work with participants, but you're not necessarily required to do all of those things at once in a traditional lab. With a thesis, you are involved in every step of the way, including writing the manuscript and defending your findings down the road. What else do we have here? Diploma distinction, which we'll talk about exactly what your diploma will say, but if you pursue a thesis, that will impact what your diploma says. And then if you started undergrad at OSU during autumn 2022 or later, you might be thinking, how does this relate to my honors project? A thesis will always work for an honors project as is, and the thesis rules will always trump the honors project rules. However, if you decide to stick with traditional research experience for your honors project, that is absolutely fine too. We can make that work. So we talked about the similarities and differences. How do you decide if a thesis is right for you? A thesis is great if you are interested in graduate or professional school. While a thesis is not absolutely required for most of these programs, but of course do your own research. This can be a great sneak peek of what those programs may entail, since many of them involve some kind of final dissertation, capstone thesis, usually a 4-year-long process. An undergraduate thesis, which spans a little bit less time, is a great way to get a sneak peek of what that entails. Thesis is great if you are involved in a traditional research lab and want to take it to the next level, maybe set you apart during the interview and applications for those professional programs. Maybe you have a kind of spin-off of your PI's lab that you want to pursue, or again, a burning research question that a faculty member is not already investigating. But for both of these experiences, they are absolutely valuable in their own way. So there is no right or wrong path to take. So you can get, again, most or all of the pieces of a thesis within a traditional lab if you prefer a little bit more flexibility. If all else is equal, choose which path that will cause you to light up during an interview, whether it's for professional or graduate programs or simply entering the workforce. So I'd say a lot of students feel like they have to do a thesis. And while this is a great way to set you apart from other candidates, if you feel like you have to, but you are miserable along the way and you are not interested in your project, this may come across during conversation and it's just not worth, you being miserable over. So hopefully this helps at least get the conversation rolling here. So now we're going to get into kind of the technicality part of things. So if you want to follow along and pull up the thesis application, I will put this in the chat. Oop. Perhaps not. Perhaps yes. Okay, so this is the thesis application that I'm putting in the chat. And then the second link here is the thesis tab on our ASC Honors website. So if you're ever looking for it, it's kind of hidden under the thesis application dropdown. So I just wanted to make sure everyone knows where to find it. So I will say we're going to come back to general processes and resources towards the end. So even if you're still on the fence about applying, there will be something for you in a little bit here. So I'm often asked, how long does a thesis take? And the answer is there's no one timeline. So this is not an official resource, but if you're a visual learner like myself, I like to share this method here. So these are the general steps you would follow throughout the undergraduate thesis process. So I'll be honest, by the time you submit your application at step 1 here, to the time your semester of defense starts at the very end, most of the work here, so the project, manuscript, applying to graduate, most of this is done behind the scenes with your faculty project advisor, and we'll talk about who that can be. So once your semester of defense starts, I do send a lot of, good luck and reminder emails, but during those in-between stages, it's up to you to ask for help if you need it, but I'm happy to help with big and little questions along the way, of course. So again, a common question I get is, how long does it take to complete a thesis? When should I submit my application, which we'll talk about? I would say most students take 1 to 2 years to complete this entire process shown on the screen, but it's very individualized depending what else you have going on. Okay, so we're going to move into kind of what your diploma will say. I'm going to debunk a couple of myths here. So you absolutely do not need to complete a thesis that is relevant to your majors. So if you are a Spanish major, for example, and you are interested in a research question that is more so related to linguistics or speech and hearing science or social sciences, that is absolutely fine. You do not have to work with a faculty member that's an expert in your topic or your department, unless you're a psychology major, and we'll talk about those distinctions down the road. So the reason I bring this up is you do not need to work with a faculty member within arts and sciences. You do not need to do a thesis that is relevant to your major. You can pursue a topic anywhere within arts and sciences. So this will apply on page 1 of the thesis application when we're just on the same page about what your diploma will read. So if you are interested in graduating with honors research distinction in insert major here, your topic must be relevant to your major. I know that kind of contradicts what I just said, but we'll dial it down in a second. Your $49.99 honors, so your thesis hours, your credits will be taken within your major department, and your primary advisor is within your major or home department, or you get a cosigner. And we'll talk about what cosigners are in a second. But again, if you have a research question that is outside of your major, or you're working with a faculty member outside of your major, seriously, no big deal. You can graduate with honors research distinction and no field specified on the diploma. So this would happen if your topic is outside of your major or outside of arts and sciences, like working with College of Medicine faculty is very common. If you are taking our umbrella Arts and Sciences $49.99 honors hours or $49.99 honors hours outside of your major, or if your project advisor is outside of your major and you do not get a cosigner on the thesis application, again, which we'll talk about. So you can never graduate with a field specified on the diploma that is not your major or one of your majors. So for example, if you are a political science major doing research in neuroscience, your diploma will never say, so-and-so is graduating with honors in arts and sciences with honors research distinction in neuroscience, just because that's confusing and it doesn't really match what your degree is in. So if you were a poli-sci major doing research in neuro, your diploma would just say graduating with honors in arts and sciences with honors research distinction. So again, there are some niche department rules that we'll cover in a bit. If you are a double major, this question comes up often. You do not need to do 2 different thesis projects to get the honors research distinction. You can pick one or the other or neither. Or if you are a dual degree student, you do not need to do 2 separate thesis processes, although that is okay to do if you want to do 2 theses, but you would just pick which degree you want the honors research distinction to apply to. So to avoid getting too far in the weeds, we'll move on here. So who can be my project advisor? Your primary advisor must be OSU faculty. So if you've ever interacted with the Find People tool, if you Google Find People OSU, that's the first thing that'll come up. You can look up a faculty member that you're interested in, or let me know if you need help. But we're really looking for titles like chair, professor, associate professor, assistant professor. So these are faculty members who are tenured or are tenure track. I know it's confusing because there's different levels of faculty status, but when in doubt, this screenshot's an example of what you might see for an associate professor in molecular genetics. So titles that will not work by themselves are things like lecturer, senior lecturer, researcher 2, lab manager, things like that. So if that's the only title that those faculty members have, they're still great to work with and we can incorporate them into your project, but you'll need to find a primary advisor that has one of the titles underlined here. So I'll say lots of faculty on Find People have multiple types of titles. We can always take the highest one, quote unquote. If you are working with a retired faculty member, that is A-OK. We typically accept the title that they had at the time of their retirement, as long as they retain P status or M status after retirement. That's just kind of permission to keep advising a certain level of students to some capacity. If you are working with faculty members outside of OSU, like maybe you did an internship away and collected data there, you still need to find an OSU faculty member to serve as your primary project advisor. Secondary advisors you might see on the application. Secondary advisors are absolutely optional. This sometimes happens when students are working with two different faculty members evenly, or maybe you're doing a cool hybrid project that combines a couple of different fields. But secondary advisors are definitely optional. Again, the second point here, your project advisor does not need to be a current expert on your topic. So again, remember, sometimes we do a thesis because no one is investigating our chosen topic. Maybe we're combining fields, all that good stuff. So they just need to be able to guide you throughout the scientific process and advise you where needed. So if you are currently working with a faculty member in a lab, that's a very common choice to choose to be your project advisor for the thesis, but maybe we are looking for help finding a faculty member. Maybe we're starting from scratch, or we're interested in branching out beyond our lab. So I would suggest chatting with professors you are close with, again, using the Find People tool. Let me know if you need help. I love creeping on the people or about tabs of, for example, I think these screenshots are from the EEOB department and then the sociology department. A lot of those tabs you can filter by research interests or just read the faculty bios to get a sense of what kind of research faculty are doing to see if it's a decent fit. Your major advisor might have suggestions. I might have suggestions. So the more people that know you're interested in working on a thesis, the better. I usually say if you approach a professor and they don't have the capacity to advise you or aren't, taking on students, they might have a colleague who is. When looking at project advisors, maybe you need a co-signer for the thesis application. So a co-signer is someone who can vouch that your thesis topic is relevant enough to your major field. So this would be if you're doing research with a topic or faculty member outside of your major. So again, if you're a Spanish major, your topic is within Spanish and your advisor is within Spanish, that's going to work. You do not need a co-signer. But maybe you are a political sciences major and you are working with a faculty member in psychology, and it's kind of a cool hybrid situation. You might want a co-signer. So again, you could graduate with honors research distinction in your major field. So co-signers can be as involved as much or as little as you want with your project. Some students work very closely with their co-signers. Some of them kind of get the signature and then we don't really chat with them again. They're kind of just there for the initial check. Again, kind of like looking for faculty on the previous point here. If you are looking for co-signers, faculty members you are close with, major advisors, chairs of departments, faculty with similar interests, all that good stuff. So I don't want to bore you with the specifics, but those are just some examples and requirements of who can be your project advisor. So just to recap, you must be working with a tenure or tenure track OSU faculty advisor for your primary person. A secondary advisor is optional, and you might need a co-signer depending on your topic and who you're working with. Okay, so I won't go too in depth here. You can read, but this is a good time to point out that whether or not the field is specified on your diploma, so whether you are graduating with honors research distinction in biology or just honors research distinction, it does not matter. You want to follow whatever path is relevant to your topic and something that makes you excited. So your topic will always, you can brag about it on your resume. It'll be noted in the knowledge bank, which we'll talk about. and all that good stuff. So it's a very common misconception that having the field specified on the diploma looks more impressive or makes it like a higher level thesis. This is absolutely not true. Again, we just need to make sure everything matches on your OSU diploma. So there is no right or wrong path to take. And if you're ever curious, feel free to email me and say, hey, Rebecca, I'm working with this faculty member with this topic. Do I need a cosigner or not? And we'll talk about what path is best for you. So those are the project advisor basics. Now let's talk about credit hours. So remember, a thesis, we need to take 4 or more hours of 49.99 honors within the College of Arts and Sciences. So this can happen before you defend. This can happen even during the semester of defense. So for example, if you are applying to defend your thesis in spring of 2025 right now, lots of students are continuing to take those credit hours up until the very end. So they do not need to be done with the grade posted before you get ready to defend. That's a common misconception. You can split up these hours however it makes sense for you. So I would say most students do 2 and 2 for 2 different semesters, but I've seen, 1 and 3, 1 at a time, all 4 at once. This is also okay. Make sure these hours are within arts and sciences. So if you take pediatrics 49.99 honors, we cannot use that towards an ASC honors thesis. Lots of you might be having previous 49.98 honors research credit. We cannot use that towards the undergraduate thesis. So again, we need 4 or more hours of arts and sciences umbrella term 49.99 honors. So a good question is, when should you submit your application? We strongly prefer you to have a thesis application on file prior to enrolling in these thesis hours, just so you're protected with that paperwork, but it's not absolutely required. So for example, if you are on my radar and asking questions along the way, the thesis application just protects you in case you're working, you're taking the wrong 49.99 hours, you're working with an ineligible project advisor, all that good stuff. So if you have the basics solidified, like a general topic and your advisor picked out, I would say go ahead and apply. We can always make tweaks and cancellations later if needed. But if you are choosing to enroll in those thesis hours before submitting the application, just keep me in the loop, and we'll make sure you are protected. If you have recently joined ASC Honors and have already taken non-honors 49.99 hours, just let me know. We're not going to make you go back and retake those credits. If these 49.99 honors hours would ever put you over 18 credits, please do an over 18-hour petition with your honors advisor. Please do not pay the extra fee. So what happens within these 49.99 honors hours? We call it an experiential class. So again, the only exception is psychology. So psychology has an actual class that meets and course content, which we'll talk about. But every other department, this is really just a placeholder course to compensate you for your time spent working on your thesis. So it's not an actual class that meets. You do not have assignments. This is just a way for your advisor to vouch that you're working on your project here. So if you're doing over 18 credits, please don't pay for that fee, since this is an experiential class. If you're working over the summer, it's ultimately up to you and your project advisor about what is appropriate, but I would recommend not paying the summer fees and rolling over the summer. If we could just take those hours in a fall or spring semester when you're full-time anyway. If you are still deciding whether or not to pursue a thesis, I would recommend sticking with the traditional research 49.98 honors hours for now. And again, you could take all 4 of your thesis hours at the very end if you wish. So ultimately, it's your responsibility to make sure you have these 4+ hours of 49.99 to graduate, and remember to enroll in them each semester. I do try to catch them, and Cam tries to catch them early so we can fix your schedules along the way. But we would appreciate you helping out here. So those are the credit requirements. This really only applies once you are filling out the application, but a common thing that is forgotten is a project description. So this is attached to your application or sent within the email that you send your application in with. So there is no set length or formality level for your thesis project description. It can be as short or as long as you need it to be, as long as it covers the basics. So what you are studying and how you are studying it, confirming that this project is yours alone and not your PI's or your PI's team, and then how your findings will contribute to your field at large. So as long as those three points are covered, your project application is fine. And again, this can be sent in an email or attached, whatever makes sense for you. Remember I said apply sooner rather than later, and we can always make tweaks down the road. This is absolutely the case. So again, after you have the basics solidified, so really things like, I guess we'll start with the right side here, things that really shouldn't change along the way. So what is printed on your diploma? Who's the main person you're working with? Your general projects and where you're taking your 49.99 hours. If all of these are solidified, I would suggest applying the thesis, submitting the thesis application. Whereas on the left side here, if we're still figuring out the title, or your project changes just a little bit, or you are delaying or canceling your defense, this is very easy to edit. So again, it's strongly preferred to have the application on file before you start taking a bunch of these thesis 49.99 honors hours, but it's not required. So hopefully that clears up a little bit of when you should submit the application. Really quickly here, depending on when you started your undergraduate journey at Ohio State. So what do we need before you can submit a thesis application? If you are one of our upperclassmen here and you started prior to autumn of 2022, just make sure you have an honors contract on file with your honors advisor. It is okay if it's not the most up-to-date or you have revisions pending. As long as we have something approved, that's all we really need before you submit a thesis application. And then for our underclassmen here, if you started autumn 2022 and later, just make sure you are up to date on your benchmark requirements. If you are doing a thesis for your honors project, these are two separate processes. You are still required to do all of the thesis things, but also all 4 benchmark surveys, even if you're doing a thesis. And then for our newer students, we do encourage you to incorporate your thesis experience into your ePortfolio and Pebble Pad, but that's not what we're talking about today. All right, really going to gloss over here because this stuff kind of comes up along the way. If you are a psychology major, math major, neuroscience, data analytics, computer science, PPE major, earth sciences, you can see the niche rules here. So this is kind of the nitty-gritty department-specific rules. I feel like we don't need this now if we're still deciding on whether or not a thesis is for us. But if you are any of these majors doing topics in any of these fields, take a look at here, and when we watch the recording or you look at the slides later, these might come up. Okay, so back to general process things, the dreaded manuscript, right? So there is no Arts and Sciences Honors general requirement for how long your thesis manuscript should be, what should be included. So as long as your title page matches the screenshot here, and this is on our website, as long as it matches what all the other manuscripts in the database or the knowledge bank say, the actual format and sectioning is up to you and your project advisor. So on the right side here, I do have some possibilities for sections depending on what is or is not applicable to your topic. So you might be familiar with these kind of sections for traditional academic papers. So we likely won't use all of these, fields, but when in doubt, if your PI doesn't have a preference on what to include, these are just some ideas on the right side. So after you have done all of this hard work and written about your hard work, it's time to present your findings before you graduate. So your semester of defense, so that's the semester in which you are participating in the oral defense. This does not have to correspond with the semester that you graduate in, although most students graduate and defend in the same semester. But if your project wraps up early, you are welcome to defend in an earlier semester. So participating in the oral defense, it sounds formal and scary. It's really not meant to be that way. I would plan for an hour with you talking about your findings and presenting for about 45 minutes with some questions and answers from your faculty committee. The good news is whoever your primary advisor is, they have to be on your defense committee and chair that committee, but you get to handpick the rest of the members here. You can also invite, friends and family or lab mates or your lab manager or other people involved to sit in on the defense if you could use that extra support. But you really get to choose who is in the room. Yeah, your committee will never send you into a defense where it is their goal to, roast you and destroy your life and really grill you with questions. Hopefully at this point, we've done all the hard work. Everyone's in the loop about what's going on. So it's really just a time to celebrate all of your effort and present your findings. So at the end of that oral defense, after the Q&A, your committee chats real quick and you sign off on the certification form. So this certifies you to graduate in real time. After the oral defense, you upload your manuscript to the knowledge bank, which we'll talk about. This, again, can happen in real time, or you can choose to embargo or delay how long it is before your thesis becomes public. So a common misconception is, sorry, I need to plug in my laptop here. A common misconception is maybe you and your PI are working on a topic and they kind of want to publicize their findings first. We can absolutely delay how often it is until your thesis becomes public on the university side. So don't worry about that too much for now, but at the end of the day, after defending your thesis, the certification form and at least uploading to the knowledge bank is what we are looking for. We're wrapping up here, guys, I promise. So what is the knowledge bank? Again, if you want to check out the second link that I put in the chat on our thesis tab of the ASC Honors website, I'm getting this information from the examples of undergraduate theses drop down here. So this is the knowledge bank that is run by university libraries. So every ASC Honors thesis project manuscript ends up here. If you are doing a thesis non-honors or within other colleges, they show up in the knowledge bank. Even, theses from doctoral students and major research presentations, they're all here in the knowledge bank. So if you are just looking for inspiration or want to see an example of what a final manuscript looks like, I would encourage you to check out the knowledge bank at some point, especially for theses within the humanities or social sciences, since those vary quite a bit on structure. So that's the knowledge bank. Besides the knowledge bank, other resources you can engage with. So again, the more people that know you're interested in a lab or in a thesis, the better. So involve your lab mates, involve your PI, whether or not there's someone that you want to be your primary advisor. You can, again, explore our website. So this is the same link as the second link that I put in the chat there. There's lots of instructions. There's a whole section on what to expect during the oral defense, which we talked about. There's a brand new FAQ section. Deadlines will always be here, as well as in the ASC Honors newsletter. We have lots of peer mentors in the ASC Honors program that are doing a thesis project. Maybe your lab mates are doing a thesis, or just general upperclassmen. Even if they're not in the ASC Honors program, they can kind of debunk a lot of the myths and kind of mentor you along the way. For funding opportunities, if you are pursuing a thesis especially, but even if you're just doing traditional research, I would encourage you to check out the Undergraduate Research Scholarship or International Research Grant. So this is on the Scholarships tab of our website. The URAP and Honors and Scholars Enrichment Grants, those are not within our office, but are very, very commonly used to fund thesis projects and research projects. Maybe your lab has funding or you have department-specific funding. Utilize your resources here. And then, of course, if you have any questions or just want to chat about what a thesis or research looks like for you, feel free to reach out to myself. My name is Rebecca Sallade. One more time, I'm the Honors Thesis Coordinator. We can always chat via Zoom or email. That's all I got for you guys today, so I appreciate you joining the webinar today.